So shooting guards are one of the most successful builds ever introduced to the game, with some builds dominating the meta for dozens of patches at a time. They are extremely popular among both casual and elite level parties. And while some can provide flashy moves without much substance, others show the ability to be the main carry at even the highest levels. This can be a source of confusion amongst many casual players, as the meta has shifted away from shooting guards in recent patches. So today, we're going to break down the shooting guard position. And while I'll try to cover many popular builds in today's game, shooting guards are a diverse position with up to 50 different builds to choose from in any given patch. So, inevitably, some will be getting left out of today's video for the sake of time. Still, by focusing on a few key builds, I'm hoping to give you an idea of the value of shooting guards and what they can bring to your current party, despite the current meta. But before we start our tier list, let's go over what shooting guards bring to the table, as well as their common attributes and stats. Shooting guards are a damage-focused position that, at lower levels, rely on their party members to set up opportunities for them to inflict high damage on the enemy basket. Their unique abilities, Technician and Hypercutter, synergize well with their damage-focused builds to punish the opposing party. Their first ability, Technician, gives a boost to their lowest offensive stat, which allows them to punish out-of-position parties with hyper-efficient melee-style attacks. They can then use the same ability to counter with longer range attacks when defenses inevitably end up camping out near the hoop. Their second ability, Hypercutter, is a simple but incredibly effective ability. It increases all cutting-based attacks, which greatly boosts their melee damage playing away from the ball. So now that we've covered the basics, let's move on to the tier list. First up in F tier, we have Terry Rozier. The Rozier build has shown success in the past by utilizing his high ball handling and mobility stats to put defenders out of position and inflict easy damage. This, coupled with his solid range attack, made him a viable off-carry for a number of years on the Hornets party. However, Rozier has always had a lower than average defensive stat, which hasn't gotten any better in the recent patches. And with his lower mobility in the most recent patch, he's been struggling to find a way to work past most defenders. His loss of mobility has affected his ranged attack as well, and Rozier has found himself with less separation than previous patches, leading to a drastically lowered ranged efficiency. And without any offensive threat to speak of, Rozier has quickly found his way out of the active party with the Miami Heat. Moving up into D tier, we have two players that could be solid backups, but shouldn't be the main carries for your party, and that's Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Grayson Allen. You may remember KCP from his contributions to the Lakers and Nuggets parties, where he used his solid defense and range-style attacks to become a critical role player during their championship runs. This build kept him closely in line with the 3-and-D build style that has pretty much dominated the role player meta in recent patches. His style does come with a drawback though, as he pretty much solely relies on higher tier party members to set him up for damage. Similar to Rozier, his last patch was definitely a letdown, with his damage efficiencies falling across the board. However, I don't think it's unreasonable to think he could have a rebound year and become a solid contributor to the Grizzly party this upcoming patch. In our other spot in the D tier, we have Grayson Allen. When it comes to long-range damage, few builds in the game can boast more efficient rates than Allen. However, Allen actually has some of the lowest base stats of any shooting guard, which were used in order to max out his ranged attack, and he actually invested enough development points to unlock a unique ability, Lock On, which guarantees the user's next attack will hit the target, so long as it's a standard 3-point attempt. Personally, I feel like this build is decent, but still lacks the qualities needed to be a consistent contributor to elite level parties. Yes, the ability to space the floor and pull aggro is critically important in today's meta, but the lack of solid defensive or mobility stats makes him a liability on the defensive end of the floor. And when he's run off the 3-point line, his lack of melee damage becomes extremely apparent. Up next in the C tier, we have Alex Caruso. The reason he fares better than our previous builds is his unusually high defense, as well as his high tier intelligence stat. He uses this combination to great effect, whether it's flying in for timely blocks or grabbing explosive steals in order to start raids on the enemy team. And while most other shooting guards crumble when facing more physical opponents, Caruso can easily tank at least a few hits, usually enough to allow his allies to come in for assistance. Unfortunately, Caruso is held back from the higher tiers due to two factors. The first is his lack of a long-ranged attack, which limits his offense in most party comps. The other is his limited endurance, which limits the amount of time he can spend in your active party in any one game. Regardless of those drawbacks, Caruso has proven time and time again that he's worthy to be a difference maker on championship level parties. Next in the C tier is Josh Hart, who shows a solid build with balanced stats across the board. He also has a unique ability you may be familiar with, Hustle, which lowers his in-game fatigue. This allows him to become an absolute menace on the defensive end, and gives him the ability to be an active member of your party for entire games. When active, Hart uses Hustle to consistently outwork the enemy party, and does everything ranging from securing tough rebounds to locking up opponents during raid-style attacks. And while his stats are average, you should never underestimate the heart that Josh can bring to your party during critical moments of the season. Up next is B tier, where we find above-average starters who can be key contributors on championship-level parties. Our first player in this tier is Norman Powell. Powell is essentially a better version of the Grayson Allen build and focuses his offensive game around his exceptionally high range stats. However, in comparison to Allen, he has much higher defense and melee damage to round out his game. This is especially evident in closeout situations. Powell has shown he has the athleticism and skill to punish unprepared defenses. Truly though, he is most dangerous when launching his ranged attacks. Defenses struggle to keep up with him around screens, allowing him to use standard pick and roll based gameplay to find efficient 3-point shots. And if that doesn't work, he can turn to a silky smooth mid-range jumper to open up his game. Moving up to B tier, we have Austin Reeves, who focuses his gameplay mostly around his high intelligence stat. He combos this with his unique ability, Opportunist, which allows him to increase the rate of his drawn fouls, and puts him in a position to be a deadly off-carry in the current meta. Outside of Opportunist, his melee damage is close to elite levels, and he is consistently able to weave his way through opposing parties to deal solid damage. When he finds himself closed off from the basket, he's able to use defenders' aggro against them and make the right pass to set up his teammates. He does lack some of the defensive abilities found with other guards on the list, but if he continues to grow on the offensive end, I could easily see Reeves making the push to A tier. Speaking of A tier, let's move on to Tyler Hero. There are a lot of parallels that could be drawn between him and Austin Reeves' offensive games, but one thing in particular sets them apart, and that's their usage rate. Simply put, Hero is asked to do more with less on a consistent basis and still manage to deal efficient damage being the main carry. Hero does this with a wide swath of skills, which historically has been focused around his elite 3-point damage. However, in the most recent patch, his melee damage took a massive step forward, pushing him to be a much more well-rounded carry. It remains to be seen if he can do this in the higher tier post-patch tournament, but so far, the results have been extremely promising. His only major drawback is his defense, which frankly is below par. So while Hero is an incredibly effective offensive build, I can't quite put him in the S tier. Our final player in the A tier is Desmond Bane. Bane is essentially a souped-up version of the KCP build, and although he hasn't played in the same amount of high-tier lobbies as KCP, he's actually a much stronger player overall. Defensively, he can hold up to almost anyone at the position, and uses his high base strength stat to force them away from highly efficient melee shots. And he manages to do this while still having the mobility to hound them on the open floor. Of course, solid defense alone doesn't do much for high-tier parties, and Bane couples his solid defense with a blistering ranged attack, where he generates damage with pinpoint-accurate pull-up jumpers, as well as an elite spot-up shot, adding to his S-tier floor spacing. Bane is the perfect off-carry for any team, and you should look for him to have a big showing on the Magic Party next patch. Anthony Edwards is the epitome of an S-tier shooting guard who wields an absolutely devastating melee game, as well as one of the best long-range attacks in the entire league. Looking at his stats, we can see that he has no holes in his game and only amplifies his effectiveness with his two unique abilities, Moxie and Inner Focus. Moxie is a cornerstone of Edwards' game, giving him a stat buff across the board with each dunk he performs. And fortunately for him, his insane athleticism allows him to consistently buff his stats to unreal levels, which once obtained, gives opposing parties almost no chance of stopping him on the defensive end of the floor. And as his XP grew, he managed to add another unique ability, Inner Focus, giving him increased accuracy on all of his pull-up ranged attacks. And with the addition of this new ability, he has implemented a variety of ranged attacks to his game, leaving opponents' defenses no good options to choose from. Defenses who retreat to the basket are quickly punished with Inner Focus, while anyone who overcommits to stop his ranged attack risks the chance of Edwards triggering Moxie and letting him take over the game. Last but not least, we have our other S-tier shooting guard, Donovan Mitchell. Mitchell's offensive stats are absolutely insane, with top-tier ranged and melee damage. But the most important factor is his unique ability, Silk Shot, which increases the rate of his nothing but net damage. This also has the added benefit of ignoring debuffs while Mitchell is off balance, allowing him to take unreal ranged attacks with absurd accuracy. This makes Mitchell an S-tier isolation threat, scoring with both long-range stepbacks, as well as trickier, mid-range contested floaters. And this is all without referencing his melee attacks, which range from beautiful pirouettes at the rim to absolutely devastating dunks. So yeah, a build that can absolutely eviscerate you from range, as well as pirouette its way into dealing critical damage, that's the level required to break the current big man meta. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider checking out my other content for more tier lists and other breakdowns.